My name is Serena Calloway. I am 29 years old, and on the morning of my wedding, while I was standing in front of a mirror in my ivory dress, my hair pinned up with wildflower clips, my hands shaking with the most beautiful kind of nervous, my parents were 4 hours away. Not stuck in traffic, not lost on a back road. They were sitting in the front row of my brother Tanner's college football banquet, smiling for photos, clapping for his trophy, eating a catered dinner in a ballroom in Nashville. They had known about my wedding date for 11 months. They chose the banquet anyway. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew except one quiet, brilliant woman sitting 3 tables away from me at that very moment, was that I had spent the last 4 months building something my family never saw coming. And 6 months later, I sent them one photo. Just one. And it said everything I never could. Before I take you back to where this all started, if this story's already hitting something real inside you, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely feel it. Drop a comment right now and tell me what state you're watching from. I love knowing who's on the other side of this, because this story, it's for every woman who was told to be grateful while she was being erased. Now let me take you back 14 months ago to a Sunday afternoon in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the moment everything began. His name is Darius Webb. He is 31 years old, a landscape architect with calloused hands and a laugh that starts somewhere deep in his chest before it ever reaches his face. He grew up in East Knoxville, the son of a school bus driver and a woman who made the best sweet potato pie in 3 counties. He is steady the way old trees are steady, not because nothing has ever hit him, but because his roots go down far enough that the storms just bend him. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in October. We were on the back porch of his grandmother's old house, the one he'd been slowly restoring for 2 years with his own hands. He had strung Edison lights along the roofline, which I thought was just his usual project excitement. There was music coming from a small Bluetooth speaker tucked behind a clay pot. Etta James, our song. He didn't make a speech. He just turned to me, held out a ring, a simple gold band with a pale green tourmaline, his grandmother's stone, and said, "You make the quiet feel like enough. Marry me." I said yes before my brain caught up with my heart. We sat on that porch for 2 hours after, just the two of us, sweet tea going warm in our glasses, talking about everything and nothing. It was the most perfect 2 hours of my life. Then I called my mother. Her name is Patricia Calloway. She is 57 years old, a former real estate agent turned full-time manager of everyone else's life. She is the kind of woman who sends group texts with a numbered agenda. She color codes her calendar. She has an opinion about font choices on greeting cards. She also has a son. My brother Tanner is 23 years old, starting linebacker for a Division II college team in Nashville. He is 6'2", effortlessly charming, and has been the son that everything in our family orbits around since the day he scored his first touchdown at age 9, and my father stood up in the bleachers and wept like he'd witnessed a miracle. I don't resent Tanner for being loved. I resent what it cost me to stand beside that love my entire life. When I called my mother that Tuesday evening to tell her I was engaged, she said, "Oh, Serena, that's wonderful. Listen, I can't really talk right now. Tanner's got a scout evaluation this week, and your father and I are putting together his highlight reel. Can I call you Thursday?" I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment after she hung up. Darius was watching me from across the porch. He didn't say anything. He just reached over and took my hand. That silence between us was its own kind of language. I want you to understand something about my family before we go any further. My parents are not cruel people. That's the part that makes it complicated. My father, Glenn Calloway, is 59, a retired high school coach who transferred every ounce of his athletic ambition into Tanner the moment he realized Tanner had the body and the talent he never did. My father is not a bad man. He is a man who found his meaning in something, and that something just happened to not include me in any significant way. My mother loves me, I believe that, but Tanner has always been the emergency. My college graduation, The day I crossed a stage with honors after working 2 jobs for 4 years, my parents left early. Tanner's got a playoff game 3 hours away. We'll celebrate you when we get back, baby. You understand. I understood. I always understood. My first big promotion at the environmental consulting firm where I worked, I called them on a Friday afternoon, genuinely bursting. My mother said, "That's so great, honey," and spent the next 12 minutes talking about Tanner's new training regimen. I learned to shrink my news, pre-trim it, present it in small enough pieces that it wouldn't feel like competition. I became an expert at disappearing while still being present. And when I got engaged, genuinely, life-changingly engaged to a man who saw me fully, my mother called me back on Thursday, 4 days later, and spent the first 6 minutes of the call asking whether the wedding date would conflict with any of Tanner's games. It was Darius who first said it out loud. We were lying in bed, lights off, the ceiling fan turning slowly, and I'd been quiet for too long. "Serena," he said into the dark, "you don't have to keep making yourself smaller so they don't feel crowded." I didn't say anything, but something shifted, cold and quiet and awake. Her name is Josephine Adler. Jo, to everyone who loves her. She's 34 years old. She was my college roommate for 3 years at University of Tennessee, a graphic designer with paint-stained fingers and a mind that works like a chess player 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. She is the kind of person who remembers the things you say at 2 a.m. when you think no one is really listening. She had been watching my family for a long time. She didn't say anything about what she was planning for months, but 5 months before my wedding, on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, she came to my apartment with a box of Ethiopian takeout and a look on her face that I recognized. That look that meant she'd been thinking about something for a long time and had finally landed somewhere. She put the food on the table, sat across from me, and said, "I need you to trust me about something. Don't ask for details yet. Just promise me that whatever happens with the wedding planning, you won't make any final decisions without checking with me first." "Jo, what do you promise me?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Okay, I promise." She nodded once, picked up her fork, and changed the subject. I would not understand what she meant for 4 more months. The wedding planning started beautifully. Darius and I set the date, a Saturday in late September. We found a venue we loved, a renovated farm property outside Knoxville called Sycamore Ridge. Outdoor ceremony, Tennessee hills in the background, room for 160 guests. We put down our deposit, we built our guest list, we chose a photographer, a caterer, a local barbecue and Southern soul food kitchen called Mama Hattie's, a florist who specialized in wildflowers and native Tennessee blooms. It felt like us, warm, real, rooted. Then my mother got involved. I want to be fair. I invited her in. I asked her to help coordinate some of the family guest list logistics because she's organized and I thought it would make her feel included. I didn't realize I was handing her a key. By month 3 of planning, my mother had opinions about everything. The venue was rustic in a way that made her nervous. The caterer, barbecue Serena, really? The flowers were too wild. The invitations I'd chosen, simple cream cards with a botanical print, were understated to the point of embarrassing. Every time I held my ground, she reached for a familiar weapon. "We've given you everything, Serena. My father and I sacrificed a lot. I just want this to be something you can be proud of. Is that so wrong?" And I would feel it, that old machinery engaging, the guilt, the memory of every school play they attended, every care package she sent during finals week. All of it real, all of it true, and all of it weaponized so smoothly she didn't even have to raise her voice. I gave ground. I kept giving ground. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I didn't realize yet that I was losing the war. 8 weeks before the wedding, my mother called Darius. He came home that evening, set his truck keys on the kitchen counter very carefully, and stood with his back to me for just a second longer than usual. "Your mother called me today." I went still. "She said you have a history of self-sabotage, that you get overwhelmed when things get serious and you find ways to escape." She used the phrase, he paused, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully. Emotionally unpredictable. The room was very quiet. 3 years ago, I had ended a long engagement to a man named Colton, who had spent 2 years systematically convincing me that everything wrong in our relationship was my fault. I left him when I finally understood what was happening. I left him because leaving was the bravest thing I had ever done. My mother had taken that story and dressed it in clinical language and handed it to the man I loved. "What did you say to her?" I asked. "I said that a woman who leaves a situation that's hurting her isn't unstable. She's intelligent." Then I thanked her for calling and hung up. He crossed the kitchen and stood in front of me. "She's not trying to protect you, Serena. I need you to know I see exactly what she's doing, and it isn't going to work." I believed him, but 2 weeks later, I found out it was already working on other people. My maid of honor, a woman named Bree, who had been my closest friend since 7th grade, called me sounding strange. "Your mom reached out to me. She seemed really worried, Serena. She said she's concerned about how fast this is moving." My Aunt Claudette stopped me at a family dinner and pressed my hand with searching eyes. "You know you can always come home, baby, if things don't feel right." My coworker Devin told me quietly that he'd gotten a call from someone saying she was my mother, asking if I'd seemed stressed lately. My mother had a network, 11 years of real estate, a church community of 200 people, a neighborhood association she'd chaired for 6 years. She knew how to work a room. She knew how to make concerns sound like love. And she was spending every coin of that social capital on dismantling mine. Now, pause right here with me, because this is the part of the story that I think hits closest for a lot of you. It wasn't the big dramatic betrayal that hurt the most. It was the accumulation, the slow drip of being managed and minimized by the people who were supposed to be your biggest supporters. The exhaustion of holding yourself together in public while quietly falling apart in private. If you've ever had someone in your life who made you feel like your joy was an inconvenience, this part is for you. Keep watching because the turn is coming and it is worth every second of this story. The first real crack appeared 6 weeks before the wedding. I came home from work on a Thursday to find 3 voicemails. The florist. "Miss Calloway, I received a call from your mother today. She mentioned you'd decided to change the floral arrangements. I want to confirm before I proceed." The caterer. "Hi, Serena. This is Marcus from Mama Hattie's. Your mother stopped by this morning with some concerns about the menu. She's asking us to replace the full menu with a formal plated dinner service. Can you call us back?" The photographer. "Hey, Serena, I got an email from a Patricia Calloway saying you wanted to change the shoot style to formal portraits only. Just checking in." My mother had not canceled anything yet, but she was moving, quietly repositioning, replacing my choices with hers, one vendor at a time, using my name, presenting herself as authorized. She was redecorating my wedding while I was at work. I called Joe. Joe answered on the first ring. "Don't confront her," she said. "Not yet. I need you to document everything. Save every voicemail, forward me every email, and do not, under any circumstances, let her know you know." "Joe, what are you building?" A pause. "A net," she said, "for when she cuts the rope." The rope got cut 4 weeks before the wedding. A Friday morning, I was reviewing field reports at my desk when my phone lit up. Sycamore Ridge, our venue. "Miss Calloway, I'm calling because we received a cancellation request yesterday for your September booking. It was submitted by a Patricia Calloway, who indicated she had authorization to cancel on your behalf. The deposit of $2,400 has been refunded to the card on file, which appears to be your mother's card. I wanted to call you directly before we processed anything further." I was already dialing Mama Hattie's before she finished. "Canceled." The florist. "Canceled." The photographer. When I reached out, she said my mother had emailed claiming I'd had a family emergency and needed to postpone indefinitely. I sat at my desk. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. I felt the ground dissolve. Not crack, not shake, just quietly, completely open beneath me. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, and I could hear, I will never forget this, I could hear the lightness in her voice, the ease, the relief of someone who has just finished a task they found unpleasant but necessary. "Serena, before you say anything, you canceled my wedding. I protected you from a mistake. With my money, my vendors, my baby, I've known you your whole life. I know what it looks like when you're running towards something for the wrong reasons. In 10 years, you will thank me. Darius is not the right. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when I'd spoken, had been completely level. I sat with that for a moment. Then I called Darius. Then Darius called Joe, and Joe said, "Tell her not to call a single vendor. Tell her not to contact her mother. Tell her I need 72 hours. Go home, rest. I've got this." We didn't ask why. We just said, okay. Here's what I didn't know yet. Joe had been planning for 4 months. The week my mother first called Mama Hattie's asking to change the menu, before I even knew it happened, Joe had quietly started building a parallel plan. She had it told me because she knew me. She knew I would have insisted on handling it myself. She knew I would have confronted my mother and lost the element of surprise. She knew I needed to not know so that I could hold myself together long enough for the plan to be ready. 3 days before what was supposed to be my wedding, Joe arrived at my apartment at 9 a.m. She had a canvas tote bag, 2 coffees, a manila folder, and that same steady expression she'd worn the day she told me to trust her. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you what I've been building. Let me get through all of it before you say a word." I nodded. She opened the folder. 2 months ago, I contacted Bluebell Farm. It's a private property 20 minutes outside of Knoxville, owned by a woman named Ruth Estes. She's a retired landscape architect. She knows Darius's work. She was delighted to help. Outdoor ceremony, wildflower fields, a covered pavilion for the reception, 200 capacity. I signed the rental agreement myself. She slid the paper across the table. The contract date? 4 months ago, 2 weeks after my mother had first called Mama Hattie's. Joe had seen the pattern before I did. The deposit was $1,800. My money. Don't argue, we'll circle back. She kept going. Florist, her name is Amara Osei. She works out of her studio in North Knoxville. Wildflowers, native blooms, loose and natural and alive. Exactly what you chose before your mother started making calls. Confirmed for Saturday. She slid a contract across. Caterer, I went back to Mama Hattie's, but I went directly to Marcus, the owner, privately, and explained the situation. He was furious. He's in. Full original menu. Pulled pork, smoked brisket, cornbread, peach cobbler. He's bringing the whole setup. Darius made a sound beside me, something low and relieved. Photographer is my friend Simone. She shoots for a lifestyle magazine in Atlanta. She's incredible. She moved to shoot to be here. DJ is my neighbor Kwame. He's been doing weddings for 8 years. String lights, the whole setup. I rented them from an event company in Oak Ridge. She closed the folder. Total cost? $6,200. I fronted it. We'll talk about that later. Here's the other thing. She set her coffee down. I have a full parallel guest contact list. Every single person on your original list, their cell numbers, their emails. Morning of the wedding, they get a text from me with the new address. I'll say there was a venue update, last minute, but wonderful. They'll come. "And my mother?" I asked. Joe met my eyes. "Your mother has the original address. Only the original. As far as she knows, Sycamore Ridge, the venue she canceled." The kitchen was very quiet. "There's one more thing," Joe said. She pulled out her phone and set it on the table. "I reached out to a woman named Celestine Park. She runs a storytelling blog and YouTube channel out of Knoxville. 60,000 subscribers, mostly women in the Southeast. She thinks she's covering a story about a best friend who built a backup wedding plan. And she is, but she'll also be there if anything else happens to document itself." I looked at Joe for a long moment. "You've been carrying this for 4 months? "You carried it for 29 years, she said. This was the least I could do. I didn't cry. I had already decided I was done spending my tears on this particular chapter. I said, "Let's do it." Joe nodded once. "Already started," she said, and smiled. That night, I lay awake in the dark and let myself think about something I had been carefully avoiding for years. I thought about what it had actually cost me to be the second child in my family. Not the little things, the big ones. The school play at age 12 where I'd had the lead and my parents left at intermission because Tanner had a tournament the next morning and they needed to drive. My drama teacher, Miss Okafor, had found me sitting on the stage steps afterwards, still in costume. She'd sat beside me for a long time, then said, "You were extraordinary tonight, Serena. I saw you." 4 words from a teacher because my parents hadn't stayed. I thought about the summer I was 19 and I'd gotten a research fellowship that would have taken me to Costa Rica for 3 months. A genuine, competitive, life expanding opportunity. My mother had cried. 3 months? But Tanner's gonna need help moving into his first apartment. And your grandmother's getting older. 3 months is a long time to be away from family. I had turned it down. I lay in the dark and let myself feel, for the first time without immediately stuffing it back down, what that choice had cost me. Not blame, just truth. Then I thought about Darius, about the man who had said, "You make the quiet feel like enough," about the fact that my mother looked at that man, that patient, rooted, deeply loving man, and seen a threat. Because a woman who is fully loved by someone steady doesn't need to keep coming home to be managed. A woman who is seen clearly by her partner stops doubting herself. And my mother needed me to keep doubting myself. It wasn't malice, it was fear. But fear doesn't get to cancel my wedding. At 4:30 a.m., I texted Jo, "I'm ready." Her response came in 30 seconds. "I know. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you get married." I made one more call before the sun came up. Her name is Aunt Vivian, my father's older sister. She is 64 years old and the only person in my extended family who has ever looked at the Tanner situation and said plainly, without softening it, "That boy is loved in a way that's making everyone else invisible, and somebody needs to say it." She has been saying it for years. No one listened. "Aunt Viv," I said when she answered, her voice already alert the way old nurses' voices are alert. She'd spent 30 years in emergency medicine. "Will you walk me to the aisle today?" A long pause. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "Baby girl, I have been waiting for you to ask me something like that for a very long time." "Is that a yes?" That is the most enthusiastic yes I have ever said before 5 in the morning. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled all the way down. Saturday morning arrived the way the best mornings do, quietly, with good light. Joe was already at Bluebell Farm by 7 a.m., Bluetooth headset, clipboard, running shoes. Amara Ose had been there since 6:30, unloading wildflowers, orange coneflowers, purple ironweed, goldenrod, black-eyed Susans, native Tennessee blooms, loose and full and alive, the exact opposite of the stiff, formal arrangements my mother had been pushing since month 1. Marcus from Mama Hattie's pulled in with a full catering truck at 9 a.m. and set up along the western edge of the pavilion. By 10 o'clock, the whole farm smelled like wood smoke and peach and something sweet I couldn't name. In Joe's apartment, I put on my dress. I'd found it 6 months ago at a vintage shop in the Old City, a 1970s ivory crepe. Simple, with a low back and just a hint of flutter at the hem. My mother had seen it online and called it dated. I called it the most beautiful thing I'd ever worn. Aunt Vivian arrived at 11 in a deep burgundy wrap dress, silver at her temples, carrying herself the way women carry themselves when they have survived things and are no longer afraid. She looked at me for a full 10 seconds. Then she said, "Your grandmother would have wept, in the best possible way." Joe checked her clipboard. 167 confirmed out of 171 guests. New address sent, all acknowledged. One name was not on the confirmation list. Patricia Calloway had not been texted, had not been called, had not received a single piece of communication about any location change. As far as my mother knew, the wedding was at Sycamore Ridge, the venue she had canceled. Guests began arriving at Bluebell Farm at 1:30 p.m. The gravel drive curved through a meadow before opening up to the farm property. The pavilions strung with Edison lights, the ceremony space set in front of a natural rise in the land with the Tennessee hills going amber and green behind it. Early September doing what Tennessee September does best. Almost every guest stopped when they came through the gate, not from confusion, from the particular stillness that comes over people when they encounter something genuinely, unexpectedly beautiful. Darius's mother, Eleanor Webb, a small, precise woman with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on her head, had called me 3 weeks ago, sounding uncertain, relaying my mother's concerns in the careful way people do when they've been given information they're not sure what to do with. Now she took both my hands. I owe you an apology, Serena. I let someone else's story get into my head about you. That wasn't fair. It wasn't right. She squeezed my hands. You are exactly what my son says you are, and he has never been wrong about a person in his life. I hugged her and meant it completely. By 2:15, the ceremony space was full. 167 people, wildflowers everywhere, the Tennessee hills going gold in the afternoon light. The only people missing were the two who had known about this day for 11 months and chosen a banquet instead. At 2:45, Aunt Vivian took my arm at the back of the aisle. The music started. A guitarist named Theo, a friend of Darius's, playing a song we had heard on the radio on our first road trip together. A long drive up through the mountains in early spring, and we'd both gone quiet at the same time because the melody was doing something to the air in the car that neither of us wanted to interrupt. Aunt Vivian leaned close. Slow steps, she murmured. Let them see you, baby. You've earned every single one. I stepped forward. 167 faces turned, and at the end of the aisle, Darius. I want to tell you that he was composed. I want to tell you that he stood there, steady as always, the way old trees are steady. He was not composed. His eyes were full, and he was not trying to hide it, because Darius has never in his life been ashamed of loving me. He stood there in a charcoal linen suit his mother had helped him choose, and he looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been carrying a long time. Aunt Vivian delivered me to him. She took his hand, then mine, pressed them together, looked him in the eye with 30 years of emergency medicine behind her gaze. She is the finest person I know. Act like you know what you have. Every day, for the rest of my life. Our friend and officiant, a woman named Dr. Priscilla Odom, a sociology professor and ordained minister who had introduced us at a mutual friend's dinner party 3 years ago, kept the ceremony exactly what we wanted it to be: human, warm, true. Darius spoke first. I grew up in a house where love was real, but it was also work, where people showed up even when it was inconvenient, where you didn't leave someone standing at the door. Serena, I will never leave you standing at the door. Not for anything, not for anyone. You are my home, and I am choosing you every single day, on purpose, with everything I have. My turn. I had written and rewritten these words for weeks. In the end, I put the paper away. I spent a long time in my life being the person in the room who made themselves smaller so there would be more space for everyone else. I got so good at it, I almost forgot there was a bigger version of me that deserved to take up space. You found her. You saw her before I did, and you refused to pretend she wasn't there. I am done being small. I choose you, not because I need you to complete me, but because I am whole, and I want to be whole beside you, out loud, for the rest of my life. The meadow went quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when something true has been said in front of people who recognize the truth. Dr. Odom pronounced us married. We kissed under the Tennessee sky, and 167 people rose to their feet. Here's what was happening 12 miles away. I learned this afterward from Celestine Park's footage and from Aunt Vivienne, who had made one quiet phone call she never told me about until later. My mother had arrived at Sycamore Ridge at 2:30 p.m. She was dressed beautifully, a steel blue wrap dress, pearl earrings, heels. She had done her hair. She had brought a card. She was not dressed like someone who was coming to stop a wedding. She was dressed like someone who expected to be welcomed, who expected, perhaps, that after everything, after canceling the vendors, after the calls she'd made, after the months of carefully placed concern, that she had done what she needed to do and now we could move forward. The Sycamore Ridge parking lot was empty. No setup, no caterers, no flowers, no guests. She sat in her car for a while. Then she started calling. Me, Darius, Joe, Aunt Vivienne, my cousin Tamara, Darius's mother Eleanor. 11 calls. Not one answered. She sat in that empty parking lot in her blue dress with her card, calling number after number into silence. She had expected to be needed. She had structured her entire relationship with me around being needed. And there was no one there. Eventually, a distant family friend, someone she ran into at a grocery store 3 days earlier and had mentioned the wedding to in passing, who hadn't been on any of our official lists, saw her Instagram story from the farm. A story Joe had posted of the wildflowers and the Edison lights. The location tag said Bluebell Farm, Knoxville. 20 minutes later, my mother's car came up the gravel drive. She heard the music, smelled the food, saw the lights through the trees. She walked to the entrance. A man named Isaac, a friend of Joe's, tall and calm with a clipboard, stepped forward. "Good afternoon. I need to check you against our guest list. I am the mother of the bride." Isaac scrolled carefully, looked up. His voice was professional and not unkind. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm not seeing your name on the list." Through the gate, she could see it all. The wildflowers, the Edison lights, the pavilion full of people laughing, eating, dancing. She could see the back of a woman in ivory dress spinning slowly in the arms of a man in charcoal linen, both of them lit gold by the afternoon sun. Everything she had tried to cancel was right there, alive and whole and glowing. And there was a gate between her and all of it. She tried to move forward. "That is my daughter. I am her mother." "Ma'am, I'm not able to admit unlisted guests. I'm sorry." Her voice rose. People near the entrance turned. Everyone there had received Joe's message about the venue change, the message that had noted simply, "Due to actions taken by a family member to cancel our original vendors without authorization, we've moved to a new venue. We can't wait to celebrate with you." They looked at my mother, not with cruelty, with the specific, quiet recognition of people who have now heard both sides of a story and understand which one is true. Then Celestine Park moved toward the gate, quietly, professionally, her camera steady, the small red light on. My mother saw it. She had spent her whole life knowing how to perform for a room, how to shape a narrative, how to position herself as the concerned, devoted, sacrificing mother in any story she was telling. She looked into that lens, and the performance stopped. Not slowly, completely, like a switch. She looked at the camera the way someone looks when they have been caught not acting, but being. She turned around, walked back to her car, got in, drove away. She did not look back. Inside the pavilion, Darius was attempting to teach his 7-year-old nephew, a boy named Chester, how to do a two-step while Chester insisted on doing something that could only be described as interpretive chaos. I was laughing so hard my face hurt. Joe appeared at my elbow with 2 glasses of sweet tea. She handed me one. "She came," Joe said quietly. I looked at her. "She left," Joe said. "You didn't miss a thing." I held my glass, looked out at 167 people eating and laughing and dancing on a Tennessee hillside in the September evening. "Thank you," I said. It felt completely insufficient. Joe clinked her glass against mine. "You would have done it for me." "In a heartbeat." "I know," she said. And we left it there, because we didn't need more words than that. Eleanor Webb stood to speak during the reception dinner. The pavilion went quiet. "I want to say something I should have said weeks ago." Her voice was steady. "I was given a story about my future daughter-in-law that was not true, and I let it get further than it should have. That is my error, and I own it." She looked at me. "Serena, you are exactly the woman my son told me you were, and my son has never once in his 31 years of life been wrong about a person's character. Welcome to this family. You have been welcome since the first time Darius said your name, and his whole voice changed." Aunt Vivian stood next. She didn't bother clearing her throat. She just waited until the room came to her because Aunt Vivian has that quality. "Serena's parents aren't here today. I'm not going to explain that because I think most of you understand it already." A long pause. "What I want to say to my niece is this. You spent 29 years believing that love had a limited supply in your family, and that most of it had been allocated before you had a chance to ask for your share. That was a lie you were handed, and you were too young and too kind to refuse it. You are not too young anymore." She looked directly at me. "You are so deeply, completely loved. Look around this room. This is what your life looks like when you stop making yourself small. Don't you ever make yourself small again. I did not cry through my vows. I cried then. And now I need to stop here and speak directly to you, not as a character, as a woman who has been on the other side of this story and walked all the way through it. If you are watching this and you recognize what I've been describing, not the dramatic cancellation, not the wedding logistics, but the accumulation, the years of being the one who makes themselves smaller, the one who pre-trims their news, the one who has learned that their joy is an inconvenience to the people who are supposed to celebrate it most, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not ungrateful for wanting to take up space. You are not selfish for asking to be seen. You are not a bad daughter or a bad sister or a bad person for finally deciding that your life belongs to you and not to the story someone else is telling about it. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors, and you get to decide who holds the key and when it opens. I was lucky. I had Joe, I had Darius, I had Aunt Vivian, and 167 people who drove to a farm they'd never heard of because someone they trusted said, "Trust me." If you don't have a Joe in your life right now, be your own Joe. Make the plan, build the backup, document everything, and know that the moment you stop asking permission to exist, something in your life will start to shift. You deserve a life that is entirely, unambiguously yours. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Celestine Park published her piece 8 days after the wedding. She kept it measured. She showed photos, the wildflowers, the Edison lights, Darius and me dancing in the September gold, Aunt Vivian laughing with her head thrown back. She interviewed Joe, who said simply, "When someone you love is about to lose something important, you don't wait to be asked to help. You just help." She noted that a family member had canceled all vendors without authorization 1 month before the wedding. She noted that a backup plan had been quietly constructed over 4 months by the bride's best friend. She did not name my mother. She didn't have to. Knoxville is not a small city, but the communities my mother belonged to, her church, her former real estate network, the neighborhood association, the women's charitable board she'd sat on for 8 years, those communities operated with the information efficiency of a small town. Within 4 days, the screenshots were circulating. My mother had posted on Facebook, twice, in the weeks before the wedding, vague but pointed posts about watching someone you love make choices that break your heart, and sometimes you have to be the unpopular voice for love, with 400 followers who knew our family. Those posts did not age well after Celestine's piece. The charitable board sent her a gentle email suggesting she take some time to step back from committee responsibilities. Her church small group leader called with concern. Former colleagues in real estate reached out asking if everything was all right. The social currency my mother had spent decades building, devoted mother, resilient woman, community pillar, began to shift in ways that money and charm could not reverse. She had made herself the story. Now she was living in it. My father called me 3 weeks after the wedding. I answered. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "We should have been there." I waited. "We made a choice, and it was the wrong one. I want you to know that I know that." "Do you know why you made it, Dad?" Another long silence. "Because Tanner needed us." Tanner is 23 years old. He has two parents who have been completely, entirely, undividedly present for every single moment of his life. He didn't need you at that banquet. He wanted you there. There is a difference. I kept my voice even. I needed you at my wedding, and I have needed you specifically in ways that I never said out loud for a very long time. I'm saying it now. He didn't speak for almost a full minute. "I hear you," he finally said. "I know you do. I love you, Dad. But hearing me and changing something are two different things. I'll be watching for which one you choose." I hung up, shaking slightly, but steady underneath the shaking. That is new, that steadiness underneath. That is what happens when you stop making yourself small. My mother wrote me a letter 6 weeks after the wedding. 4 handwritten pages. I read it once, all the way through, then sat with it for 3 days before I responded. She wrote about fear, about what it felt like to watch me build a life that didn't orbit around her, about Tanner and how pouring herself into his success had felt like purpose, and how she hadn't realized until recently that she had been using purpose as a substitute for something she'd never properly dealt with. About the divorce, about the years she'd spent being strong in ways that had calcified into control without her realizing the transformation had happened. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I wrote back one page. Mom, I know you love me. I have never doubted that. I am also clear that love without accountability becomes something else. You canceled my wedding. You called the man I love and told him I was broken. You spent months carefully dismantling my relationships one by one, using concern as a cover. Those things caused real harm. I am not able to minimize that. What I can tell you is this. I am not closing the door. I am not interested in punishment. I am interested in truth. If you are willing to talk to a therapist, genuinely, consistently, not as a performance, then I will be willing to have one joint session with you. That is what I can offer right now. One door, barely open, but it's there. I love you. That has never been in question. Serena. I sent it. And then I did something I had never in my life successfully done before. I let it go. I gave it to the future and released my grip on the outcome. The financial chapter sorted itself out in ways we hadn't expected. Armed with documentation, the emails where my mother had used my name without authorization, the voicemails, the paper trail Joe had been quietly building for 4 months, we went back to the original vendors. The florist reviewed the evidence and issued a full refund, $1,300 back. The venue, Sycamore Ridge, upon reviewing the cancellation correspondence and understanding what had actually occurred, refunded our deposit and offered a credit. Darius said, "First anniversary dinner." I said, "Done." Mama Hottie's Marcus waived the rescheduling fee entirely and said, "Come back anytime and tell your friends." We paid Joe back within 6 weeks. She resisted deeply. I told her that honoring love means honoring it with action, not just feeling. She called me insufferable. I took it as high praise. And then something happened that none of us planned. Celestine's piece included detail shots of the wedding decor, specifically the hand-hammered iron ceremony arch that Darius had spent 3 months building in his workshop, telling me it was a project for a client. He had made it as a surprise, carried it to the farm in sections, assembled it the morning of our wedding before I arrived. It was extraordinary, geometric, organic, something between art and architecture. Within a week of the piece going live, Darius had received 12 inquiries. A boutique hotel in Chattanooga wanted custom ironwork for a lobby renovation. A landscape architecture firm in Nashville wanted to discuss a long-term design partnership. A private estate outside Asheville had seen the arch and wanted one for their garden. His side work, the metalwork and landscape design he did on evenings and weekends, suddenly had a waiting list 6 months long. My mother did not intend for us to get that, but the wedding she tried to destroy became the door that opened the next chapter of our life together. 6 months after the wedding, a Thursday afternoon in early March, I come home from a field visit, mud on my boots, field notes in my bag, late afternoon light turning the apartment gold, and there is something on our doorstep. Not in the mailbox, on the doorstep. A small envelope, cream-colored, sealed with a sticker of a single flower. My name on the front in handwriting I know as well as my own. No return address. I open it, standing in the doorway. No letter. No words. Inside, a photograph. Old, printed on the matte paper of the early 1990s, worn soft at the edges. A woman and a small girl, maybe 4 years old. They are sitting in a wildflower meadow. The woman, my mother, young, before everything, is holding a black-eyed Susan up to the little girl's nose. The little girl is laughing with her whole body, the way children laugh before they learn to be self-conscious about it. The little girl is me. I stand there in the doorway for a long time. My mother had found this photograph, had printed it, or maybe she'd always had it, kept it somewhere close, and she had brought it to my door and left it without knocking, without asking anything of me, without a single word attached to ask for something in return. Just a memory of a meadow, of a woman who once sat in wildflowers with her daughter and held up a flower and made her laugh. Before the fear, before the control, before everything that followed, before she forgot that love doesn't require the other person to stay small. I don't know if she is in therapy. I don't know what is happening on her side of this story. I don't know if this photograph is an apology, or a beginning, or just a woman pressing her hand against a closed door to see if it is still warm. Maybe she doesn't know either. Maybe this is how it starts. Not with a conversation, not with an explanation, just a photograph, left on a mat, of two people in a wildflower meadow, before the world got complicated. I carry it inside, set it on the shelf next to our wedding photo, Darius and me under the Tennessee sky, wildflowers and Edison lights, and 167 people on their feet behind us. Darius comes in from his workshop, sawdust on his hands, a smear of dark grease on his forearm. He sees me at the shelf, crosses the room, looks at the photograph. He doesn't ask who left it. He knows. He stands beside me for a moment, both of us looking at those two people in the meadow. "You okay?" he asks. I think about the question. About 29 years of making myself small. About a backup plan built in secret by a woman who loved me enough to prepare for the worst before I could see it coming. About 167 people who drove to a farm they'd never been to because they trusted me. About an arch made of iron, built by hand in a workshop on quiet evenings by a man who wanted to make something beautiful for the person he loved. About a photograph on a doorstep. About wildflowers. About all the ways love shows up when you finally stop blocking the door. I put the photograph down gently, turn to him. "Yeah," I say, "I really think I am." And I mean it. For the first time in my life, without qualification, without waiting for permission, without shrinking myself down to fit inside someone else's idea of who I should be. I mean it completely. Through the window, the March evening is going gold across the rooftops. Somewhere in Darius's workshop, a tool rests on a table next to something he is building. Somewhere across the city, Jo is probably on her couch with her cat and a design project, not thinking about me at all, because that is what people who love you well do. They show up completely when you need them, and then they let you live. My name is Serena Calloway Webb. I am 29 years old, and for the first time, truly, completely, without an asterisk, my life is mine. If this story moved something real in you, please like this video and subscribe. Not because I asked, but because you want to be here for more stories like this one. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had someone in your life who quietly built you a backup plan before you even knew you needed one? Or are you that person for someone right now? Tell me. I read every single one. Whatever your version of Bluebell Farm looks like, I hope you find it. See you in the next one.